conference chair Cheney was exactly right. Yesterday was an unbelievable day to see the Speaker of the House do what she did about a document that she hadn't even seen. And my guess is because they are so focused on attacking the individual the American people made president of the United States that they're looking for anything and everything. The Michael Cohen hearing didn't work for them. The John Dean hearing didn't work for them. The Mueller report and Mueller hearing didn't work for them. The Lewandowski hearing didn't work for them. So let's do a press conference and let's talk about something we haven't even seen, because maybe that'll work. That's how desperate and ridiculous this has gotten, and I think the American people see through it. They see clearly the job that this president has done, and they appreciate that, and they think what the Democrats are doing is ridiculous. And frankly, the precedent it sets is dangerous as well. So, look, we'll look at the document, but I think the facts are that they got nothing else, and they're doing the kind of things that they did yesterday. 160 some Democrats, I think, are wanting to move forward about something they haven't even read, haven't even seen. I don't know that we've ever seen that in the history of the Congress. So,
thank you for being here this morning. We have just come from our conference and really focused on the discussion about what the Speaker of the House and the House Democrats did yesterday. And, we have watched now, ever since President Trump was elected, the House Democrats have been careening from impeachment theory to impeachment theory. They've careened from target to target. For a while, 10 days or so ago, they were focused on impeaching Justice Kavanaugh. Now they're back to focusing on President Trump. But what we see repeatedly is a complete lack of focus on, concern about evidence and facts. And what Speaker Pelosi did yesterday really was the worst we've seen yet, where she announced an impeachment inquiry without any evidence, without seeing the transcript of the phone call at issue, without seeing any details from the supposed whistleblower. And when you think about what that does, both from the perspective of our constitutional obligation and from the perspective of our national security, it ought to give every American grave concerns that they are dealing with this in a way that is absolutely such a flagrant disregard of their constitutional responsibility. When Speaker Pelosi went out yesterday and announced that there would be an impeachment inquiry of the President of the United States, at that moment, our president was up in New York at the General Assembly, and he was there having meetings, as presidents do during those sessions, bilateral meetings with other heads of state. There was absolutely no justification to launch this impeachment inquiry at all. No reason she had to do it yesterday. One can only guess that she did it because she was intentionally trying to weaken the president, trying to weaken his hand as he's dealing with crucial issues of national security with our allies and some of our adversaries. So it was an absolute disgrace. We're now in a situation where not only have they hurt national security, but they're fundamentally abdicating their constitutional responsibility. Impeachment is a very solemn, grave responsibility we all have. And for this speaker to be going down this path, and for the Democratic caucus to be going down this path before they have seen any evidence at all, is something that I think is absolutely unprecedented in our history.
Yesterday was a low point in Nancy Pelosi's speakership. And when you see a Speaker of the House come forward and accuse a President of the United States of breaking the law to the level that it should meet the definition in the Constitution of high crimes and misdemeanor, without even being able to name the crime, without having even read the report that she's basing this wild and irresponsible accusation on, is the height of irresponsibility for Speaker of the House to do that. And unfortunately, we've seen this drumbeat towards impeachment from her conference since the day Donald Trump got elected. They made it clear first with the resist movement that they didn't want to acknowledge he was elected. He was duly elected by the people of this country. There's an election next year where we can hash out who's going to be the next president. And when Donald Trump's reelected, who knows if they'll continue to go down that road. But the fact that they're using this majority to try to undo the results of the 2016 election is disgraceful. They can't name a high crime and misdemeanor. If you're going to base it on a press report from a second-hand person that thinks they heard something, and that's the most you've got, to claim that crimes were committed, This is a serious responsibility that the Congress has. Only 3 times in the history of our country has a House of Representatives brought forward articles of impeachment. Yet Jerry Nadler, when he took the chairmanship of the committee just a few weeks ago, said that he wants to bring articles of impeachment to the House floor by the end of this year. And when you ask them, what are those articles of impeachment? They can't name a single one. They thought the Mueller report was going to produce impeachable evidence, and it didn't. In fact, it showed the president didn't collude. And so instead of dropping it and actually focusing on the real problems this country faces, instead of bringing the USMCA bill to the floor, which would pass and create over 160,000 new jobs in America, which has broad support, Republicans and Democrats, labor unions, and trade groups. Instead of doing those kind of things, lowering prescription drug prices, when we've brought bills out of committee unanimously to lower prescription drug prices, which is a major problem that families are facing. Those bills could be signed into law today, creating new jobs and lowering drug prices for Americans. But instead, late Nancy Pelosi is wasting her speakership trying to undo the results of the 2016 election by impeaching the president with no basis. Now, if you look at the Constitution, it gives the House of Representatives the ability to impeach a president for crimes. It's a check on the executive. And instead, Nancy Pelosi is using impeachment as a check on the electorate because she doesn't agree with the results of the 2016 election where people actually elected Donald Trump president. There is going to be an election next year, and we can litigate all of the differences between a conservative, pro-business approach to free market enterprise versus socialism. And clearly they're moving towards socialism. But to abuse the power of the House and the speakership by trying to go after a president even when there's no basis of fact that she can name. She cannot name one high crime and misdemeanor, and yet she still wants to move forward with impeachment. It's disgraceful.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And the transcript has now been released in the phone conversation between President Trump and President Zelensky, and the evidence is clear. Unfortunately, that the Speaker of the House of Representatives has been functionally catfished into a politically fatal impeachment proceeding based on rumors, based on faulty evidence, and based on a bloodlust for the president politically that does not serve our nation well. Let me give you the high points. There is no quid pro quo between President Trump and President Zelensky for anything, much less military aid. There is no 8 times a reference to Joe Biden. I think the Wall Street Journal will have a good deal of retracting to do today. And in fact, President Zelensky himself identifies the rooting out of corruption as the reason for his election. Early on in the conversation between President Trump and President Zelensky says, we here in the Ukraine are trying to drain the swamp, much in the way you are working to drain the swamp in the United States of America. This wasn't a call about leverage. This wasn't a call about threats. This was a mutually appreciative and mutually laudatory call between 2 leaders who are trying to clean up some of the garbage in their respective countries that has polluted politics. Now, the president does ask for a favor from President Zelensky, but the favor is on behalf of our nation. The favor we seek is cooperation between the Zelensky government and Attorney General Bill Barr as we work to determine what activities in the Ukraine may have been in any way involved in the 2016, not 2020, but in the 2016 efforts to interfere with the United States election. The president even references CrowdStrike, attempting to get to the bottom of these improper actions, which again may have emanated in the Ukraine, and John Solomon with The Hill has got a great deal of reporting on that very question. Zelensky ran against corruption. And thus it would be only appropriate that in a conversation about that election victory, they would discuss and reference what are obviously mutual goals between the United States and the Ukraine to have the world safer for democracy. Now, the president also mentions Mayor Rudy Giuliani. And let me be clear about this. Mayor Giuliani has every right to go to the Ukraine and try to ascertain whether or not activities in that country were harming his client as a result of the corrupt connections which may have existed between the DNC and some elements in Ukraine. I feel like we've been here before. House Democrats told us it was all about collusion. We had to wait for the Mueller report. Well, when the Mueller report falls flat on collusion, then it's all about obstruction of justice. Until Robert Mueller comes and testifies, and that falls flat, then it's all about abuse of power. Until the Democrats go to court and are unable to make the case in court that there's been an abuse of power. And now, lo and behold, it's all about the Ukraine. Well, you know what? I saw this movie as it related to Russia. I didn't like it very much, and I doubt I'm going to enjoy the cheap Ukrainian knockoff. The Speaker has embraced these concerns, and I fear that her embrace of impeachment does great damage to the House of Representatives, because there may be a time where we have to solemnly exercise our impeachment powers because there is true crime or corruption, and the Speaker's actions have embarrassed the United States Congress, and they harm our entire country. President Zelensky, in this call, indicates that he will conduct an investigation into corruption. It's a promise not only that he made to President Trump, but that he made to his own citizens. And in that promise, President Zelensky says that any investigation will be both open and candid. Open and candid investigations of corruption, of election meddling. I sure would like to see that level of candidness and openness in our House of Representatives, and certainly my greatest hope is that the Attorney General's investigation into the corrupt origins of the efforts to smear the President of the United States will be exposed, and those responsible will go to jail. That is how we restore honor to this House. That is how we solve some of the great and heal some of the great wounds that were inflicted on this body by the Speaker yesterday. Maybe next time the radical left will wait for the facts before engaging in a reflexive, fact-free impeachment. I yield back.
So, Mr. President, yesterday evening, Speaker Pelosi announced the House of Representatives will begin what she called an official impeachment inquiry. But really, Mr. President, we know that House Democrats have been indulging their impeachment obsession for nearly 3 years now. A never-ending impeachment parade in search of a rationale. The very day that President Trump was inaugurated, the Washington Post ran a news story with this headline: "The campaign to impeach President Trump has begun," the day of his inauguration. Later that year, there were articles of impeachment introduced over the president's language. So clearly this has been an ongoing project for House Democrats since practically the moment that Secretary Clinton lost the election. For months, Democrats insisted that Special Counsel Mueller's investigation or the work of the Senate Intelligence Committee would prove their theories about a conspiracy between the Trump campaign and Russia. It didn't happen. The facts disappointed them, but the impeachment parade kept marching along. And yesterday, even though bipartisan committee investigations into the new whistleblower allegations are underway, and just hours after the president offered to publicize the details of his phone call with the president of Ukraine, the dam finally broke. Speaker Pelosi couldn't hold back the far left any longer. Before any of us even had the facts in hand, she caved to the left and announced an impeachment inquiry. If this all sounds familiar, that's because at the time, literally 1 week ago, the same Democrats were shouting about impeaching Justice Kavanaugh. That rush to judgment was on the basis of a sketchy story in a major newspaper that promptly had to publish an enormous correction. But 1 week later, here they go again, threatening impeachment without the facts in hand. So look, Mr. President, Senate Republicans support the established proper procedures for considering this whistleblower report. And in the meantime, while our friends across the Capitol rush to judgment and dive deeper into their nearly 3-year-old impeachment addiction, we'll stay focused on the American people's business.